Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Alicia Dianne Art. I am Alicia Dianne, and we are doing our book club review. I'm going to see if I need to adjust my camera. It feels like it's a little bit blurry. Is it a little bit blurry? Is that better? I think that might be a little bit better. All right, so we are reading again Selling for Dummies. This is chapter 12, Closing Sales. So I sorry I missed last week, but we were trying to catch up and get right back in where we left off. So closing sales is obviously an important chapter. Let's see how many pages it was. It was from page 209 to 232. Okay, so it was like 20-ish pages, something like that. So we're going to go over and see. And one of the things it starts off saying is that closing the sale starts like right at the beginning. I think it starts like the first impression or like even your reputation. I mean, that's all part of closing the sale because the person is buying you. At the end of the day, they are buying you when they buy your art, when they buy your if they buy service from you as an artist. They are ultimately buying you, and they should like you. They should feel like you're an approachable person. They should feel like you're nice and that you are honest and that you're somebody that they want to do business with. So it just starts off by just as a reminder that closing the sale starts at the beginning of the sale, of the transaction, of the beginning of meeting the client or the potential client. That's really where it starts. And one of the things it starts about is when should you close the sale? And it noted a couple of times where the buyer might be interested. So it says maybe the buyer starts to change their pace. Maybe they're starting to slow down with like learning like what the details about what you're trying to sell. Either that, or they might speed up and might like feel like more in a rush and or like trying to cut you off in what you're telling them. That means they might be interested in just going ahead and buying. So this is something too to notice, like if you're at a convention or you're at an art show or you're at a gallery and someone is like, all of a sudden you're explaining about the art and then they're like, all right, like maybe you might think it might be rude, but maybe they just want to buy. And the prospect starts asking lots of questions. That could be a sign. Or they are asking about terms, so that could be another sign. So these are just little tidbits to look for when you are trying to close a sale, or if you're thinking about maybe it might be time. These are just some things that you can look for, and that could be like a sign that it's time to, ask them for the buy. And one of the things I learned about in this chapter is like really you should always ask for the buy at some point. And a lot of people just kind of let a sales go by not just asking the customer like, okay, do you like to have this, or should we start writing the paperwork, or are you ready to move ahead to the next step, or something along those lines. And a lot of the new sellers, including myself, like we miss out on sales by not including that. And one of the things that it says as a tip to like test the waters is that you do want to test the waters, and the way to do that is to kind of like ask a little bit more of a question. So it says you ask a confirmation question. So like, can you see yourself enjoying this, or can you see like yourself with this product, or can you see yourself with this book, or can you picture yourself with this, or do you think this is something that you might want that your spouse might like to have, or you ask some kind of a leading question like that. And if they kind of hesitate and say, well, I'm not sure about this or that, it means they're not ready yet. Like if they're like kind of like, I still am not sure about this, and that means you need to keep selling. But if they're like confirming, or like yeah, or like they respond positively, go ahead and just close it. Start ringing them up. Start getting the paperwork out. Whatever you need to do to just kind of move it along. So I thought that was pretty good. Let's see. Another testing question could be like, how are you feeling about this so far? So like, let's say you're trying to tell them like how amazing your artwork is, or your painting is that you took forever, or your sculpture, and you're like, oh, you're talking about it and telling them all of the history of how you learned to make this and do this craft, and if you've been talking for a couple minutes, you might want to stop and say, hey, so what are you thinking about this so far? And it's the same thing. You want to kind of see if they're hesitant, or if they're really like, kind of eating it up, or they're like interested, they're expressing that interest. Then that means it's probably time to go ahead and try and close that sale. One of the things it says is jumping to an erroneous conclusion. I thought that was really interesting. So one of the things about that, it could be like somebody could say, well, I'm interested in getting this for like Mother's Day. And so like, or I'm interested in getting a piece of art for Mother's Day. And you can pretend that you forget when you need it for, and that can kind of help them to like confirm that they're paying attention. So maybe you'll say, oh, you said you needed this by June. So they could be like, obviously, like Mother's Day is in May, so they would like correct you and be like, no, I needed it in May. And then you can be like, oh, well, should we start going along? So it's kind of like, it says that, you need to use this carefully, and you never want to use it if it feels uncomfortable for you. And it's a way to like also test the waters to see if that person is interested, just to kind of like gauge how much they are actually paying attention to you. But he also gave this as an optional thing, and some people may or may not feel comfortable asking that type of question. Another one it said was tossing like a porcupine, which I thought that was a strange one. But one of the things that they said is that if you're a good seller and they ask you if you have something in another color, you give them like those options. Like, all right, if they want something in red, you could say, all right, well, I have like, cherry red, burgundy, like auburn, like, which one do you like? So you give them multiple options according to what they ask for, and making sure that you are able to give them what they want. So let's see. When she stops you, she tells you that you need to stop selling. All right, so maybe they might stop you like while you're talking. So either that means that they're totally are interested and they want to just move ahead, or they're not interested at all. Either way, don't keep trying to sell them if they stop you from selling. I think that's kind of an obvious one, but I think that's good. Let's see. It gave a reflex question. So this would be like for like if you're starting to do paperwork, you might ask them like what their full name is, or what their company name is, or a shipping address, and this can kind of move the conversation along to see whether or not they're interested in to keep moving, or they might stop you totally and be like, no, I'm not ready yet, and that means they're just not ready yet. So you need to still like see if you're able to deliver, and that is going on to the next point. So the next point is if you really do want to make sure that you are asking them about what it is that they want, so that you'll know that whether or not you'll be able to meet their needs, because you do want to make sure that every person that you're trying to sell your art to, so your service of illustration or character design, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're able to deliver, so you're able to do it in the timeline that they need, you're able to do the style they need, color, size, all of that. So ask those types of questions so that you know that you're able to deliver what they want, because you do want all of your customers, clients to be happy. You don't want anybody writing you a bad review on Reddit, or I don't know what people use nowadays. What is it called? Yelp. You don't want anybody writing you bad reviews, so make sure that you ask questions to get the answers that you want. All right, so another one, it said it's like asking them like confirming questions, like would they like it to be delivered on the 1st or the 10th of the month. So just kind of like affirming like when they need the product, that can help you to move the sale along if they are interested. If they're not, then they're not going to buy it. Another one was important was empathy. You really expressed important of understanding where your customer is, kind of putting yourself in their shoes and just knowing where they come from. Be understanding, like if they're going through anything, if they're on a tight budget, just don't use any judgment. Always just try and be understanding, and give them the benefit of the doubt always, because you never know like what somebody's going through. Another thing that they said was a pros and cons list. So you can, especially if they're making like a big decision, like maybe you're helping somebody like make a book deal or something like that. Like it could be something that's pretty costly, so you want to think about helping them to make a pros and cons list. And so to do that, you would just he listed as Benjamin Franklin. This is Benjamin Franklin idea. I don't know if he's the originator of this, but whatever. I would just call it a pros and cons list. And so you would just put a check mark next to all the pros, like talk about it with them and put a check mark for each so that you can actually list off at least, he said, like at least like 10, he says 6 to 10 points, and then help them to remember all of the good things that they talked about while you were explaining your product. So just remember to do that pros and cons list, and any negatives, of course, you want to say, all right, well, what are the negatives, and help them to remember the negatives too. You don't want to like discount the negatives. You really want to do make them make the right decision for them. And let's see. And he also said, like, after you make that, if there's like, 10 positives to 2 negatives, like, you kind of encourage them, like, all right, wouldn't it be a good decision then to go ahead on with this? So you kind of want to give them that encouragement to keep going. Let's see. This was a long chapter, I feel. So I'm just going to kind of jump to where I feel like any other points that I felt like were positive. One of the last things I'll talk about was he said, using a calculator, so that if they do have an issue with the price, you can say, well, how long is this product really going to be useful to you? And if it's like a children's book, it will be like for a really long time. That's like a lifetime. So I would say, like, hey, you could be earning money off of this for the next 30 years. So, like, if you're worried about how much extra are you worried about, you're extra worried about paying an extra $1,000, and then you divide it by 30 years, and then you divide it by 365 days of those years, and it will be end up being really small amounts. So you actually want to use a physical calculator when you're doing this, so that they can realize, oh, hey, for my Starbucks coffee, I can actually have a book in the world that's illustrated beautifully. So let's see. Another thing, I'll just point out one last thing, and they actually do. He's really like, by the end of it, they'll realize that it's really a small amount of investment that they're actually giving for something that is really valuable, like something that's going to be bringing in money for the next 30 years or more. And let's see. One final thing was, oh, if they need to think it over, like if you're giving them all the cons and you're giving them all of the benefits, and they're still like, oh, I need to think it over, then be direct and ask them, like, what is it about it that you need to think over, so that you can try and resolve any hesitation. Like, if there's anything that they're seriously like hesitating, you want to know what that is, so you can potentially resolve that. So I think that was some really good advice. And the very last point that I'm going to point out was that he was saying, like, if you do ask the right questions, you do ask enough questions, and this is really something that's going to benefit, you really like truly believe this is something that's going to benefit the other person, then try to convince them. Because I think sometimes we just kind of tuck our tail and just kind of walk away if we think that somebody doesn't like what we have. But the truth is, if you're doing like the research, if you're talking to the person and you know that they're a good fit for what it is that you offer, then try and convince them. Because I know times where I've like not bought things and I regret it later, like, oh man, I should have got that. I'm never going to get the chance to get that again. So you don't want somebody to have that type of feeling. And another thing is, they could just be scared. Like, I know that I've worked with people for children's books, and they were afraid to even start. But after we got started, like, they were just so happy, like, oh, I'm glad that you like talked to me. I'm glad you called me again, because I was afraid to get started, but I really love how this is coming out. And so maybe they're afraid to take that step because they've never done it before, but it really will be a growth thing for them. It will really be something that helps them grow and helps them to realize even dreams. I mean, that might be kind of a stretch, but sometimes it's true. Sometimes people are afraid to see their dreams. So maybe it's been a book or it's been a concept that they've been thinking about for 5-10 years, and they're afraid to make that step to see it come to reality, or afraid of failure. But give them that encouragement to take that step, and they might actually be really, really grateful for that. So that is where I'll end off for this week. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this book club, and I will see you guys next week. We'll be reading chapter 13 next week, and that one is Getting Referrals from your satisfied clients. That's where we want, always happy clients, so we can get those referrals, okay? So I will see you guys next time. So until then, be grateful, live balanced, and be yourself. Bye-bye.